Alright everyone, welcome to Tuesday's video. It's Christmas Eve today and I've got a wee video for you today just to send you into the festive season. Some would say we're already firmly inside the festive season. We're nearly in transfer season. Bit of focus on that today, and I'm going to go through some of your comments from Sunday's enthralling draw with Dundee United. Yep, Stevie joined me for the match reaction yesterday, so please feel free to check that out. It's linked at the top. And we discussed the game, as I say, just a cracker at Tannadice, and also where Celtic sit going into our final two games of 2024, and maybe a little bit of focus on the first game of 2025 as well. Right, bit of a transfer update from Stephen McGowan at the Daily Mail that has literally broken in the past hour as I'm recording, so late last night for you. And we are just a week away from the January transfer window opening, so fair to say that things are starting to get into gear. It's going to be a relatively busy month for Celtic. I think we're going to see, I would put my neck in the line and say we're going to see at least 2 new signings coming in, possibly more. And I think you're going to see a number of players moving on from the club as well. I know there was a mention of Stephen Welsh. I think KV Mechelen, the Belgian side, have been linked with him. So Stephen Welsh certainly seems like he's going to be heading off. Thought Stephen Welsh did fine at the weekend, and for the good of his career, I hope he gets out and plays more regularly. Yeah, Mike Nawrocki might be another one. I'm just thinking if Welsh and Nawrocki were to leave, would that mean we'd then sign another centre-back? Because if we had like the old Carter Vickers trusty missing again, who would play next to Liam Scales? Lewis Palmer potentially, not next to Liam Scales. What I'm saying is Lewis Palmer potentially will leave the club as well. Right, what about Kyogo Furuhashi though? Because the report last night, a bit of a surprise, I would say, to hear that Kyogo is being targeted by MLS side Atlanta United. Now, they're now managed by our former manager, Ronnie Deila, who was appointed there just over the course of the weekend. They've actually got a wee relationship with Aberdeen, and I've just got a feeling somewhere down the line Ronnie Deila's coming back to Scotland to potentially manage someone like Aberdeen. Yeah, Atlanta, who signed Georgios Giacomakis from us a number of years ago, were apparently in for Kyogo in the summer. According to this report from the Daily Mail, they were even more serious than Manchester City about signing Kyogo in the summer. They were willing to pay around £10 million for him, but they were given no encouragement from Celtic. Now, they're still said to be wanting a marquee centre forward ahead of the new MLS season, which gets underway in February. They have 2 designated player spots left, which basically means you can sign players on higher wages. And the Mail say that Kyogo is on their list of targets to potentially be one of those players. Obviously, as I say, a bit of a surprise in that, like, I think if Kyogo leaves Celtic, most of us would expect it to be to like another European team. I've always thought Spain seems like an obvious place for Kyogo to go and play. I've always thought like Kyogo might fancy a wee go at La Liga, or maybe down south to the Premier League, or, you know, there's a lot of Japanese players and Asian players in general playing in Germany, so potentially that could be an option for him. I don't think many people would have had like the USA as a potential destination for Kyogo, but it seems like we're going to get a bit of interest in him from Atlanta United in January. Now, I don't think he's going to be allowed to leave in January. Clearly, that was Celtic's stance in the summer. It would have been interesting to see what would have happened had, like, Manchester City, for example, come in with like a pretty mega bid, because obviously every player kind of has their price at Celtic, at most clubs, to be honest. Clearly 10 million isn't going to be that price for Kyogo, and you can have your debate over whether that's a decent enough fee for, I think, a 29-year-old, nearly 30-year-old. I think he's 30 next month. But he's obviously still a very important player for us. But so I don't think he's going to leave in January unless something like crazy happens and we get a huge offer or whatever. But I do think it's an interesting conversation to have of, you know, how long is Kyogo going to stay at Celtic for? He's been here 3.5 years now. As I say, he's 29. He's got another couple of seasons after the end of this one on his contract. He just signed a new one at the start of last season when Brendan Rodgers came in, 4-year deal. So I think he's going to be 32, nearly 33 by the time that deal is over. So I think it's interesting to ponder how long Kyogo sticks around for. Does he want Celtic to be his main career club, the club that he's remembered most for playing for, or does he want to play in a top 5 league, for example? So obviously MLS isn't that. So yeah, I think it's one to keep an eye on next month. As I say, I don't think there's much chance of Kyogo moving on, but I do think it will be interesting to see if we look at another forward, and if that forward is signed with the idea that he could eventually become a first choice Celtic player, potentially alongside Adam Ida. I know there's been chat about Johnny Kenny as well. I don't know if it's a case of Johnny Kenny's, we're going to take a look at him and then decide whether we feel we need a third forward, or whether we're going to sign one regardless, and then maybe hopefully Johnny Kenny can surprise us and become a really good player for us. He's certainly done well at Shamrock Rovers and will be returning to the club if he hasn't already. But the Kyogo stuff's interesting. I think there's always going to be interest in our best players, and I think most people would be more concerned about Kyogo's form at the moment and hopefully getting him back to the level that we all know that he can play and we all love him for. So that's that. Elsewhere in this report from Stephen McGowan, he says that Brendan Rodgers held a transfer meeting with Dermot Desmond and Michael Nicholson in Dublin last week. Now, Rodgers let that slip at his Friday press conference when he was asked about what he'd been up to since the League Cup final, and he explained, basically was putting across that you don't really get days off as the Celtic manager, and he did say, I was in Dublin having a kind of meeting, transfer meeting, I think he said, with Dermot Desmond, Michael Nicholson, etc. So that's not news, but that definitely happened. Stephen McGowan says a left winger is said to be a priority signing in January. Now again, I think that's something that the manager told Celtic fans at some private event. I don't know if it was one of these kind of shareholders or investors club meetings that happened at Celtic Park last week, but I heard that on the Celtic Exchange podcast that Brendan Rodgers had said pretty openly that a winger will be signed in January. So I think that's clearly the priority position, and we'll come back to that. Rodgers also said to want to secure Kieran Tierney for a return to Celtic next month, regardless of what happens with Greg Taylor's contract situation. Obviously, Greg Taylor can speak to new clubs in a week or so, and it seems the more that drags on, Greg Taylor might not be here next season. You would, just reading between the lines, think that something would have been sorted by now if Greg Taylor was fully committed to Celtic beyond the end of this season. But certainly seems like Kieran Tierney is on the manager's wish list. He's out of contract himself next summer, so maybe Celtic could sign him in January, pay a couple of million and get him. Maybe a pre-contract is more likely. Maybe a loan could be involved at first, then going into a pre-contract. The Tierney stuff's been covered extensively, but it certainly feels like that is going to be a goer in January, and if not January, in the summer. So we're looking at left back, potentially Tierney. Left winger, as we said last week, Michel Ange Balikwisha was mentioned. There's also been rumours about Jota. Yes, if you're going to bring back Kieran Tierney on the left-hand side, why not bring back another £25 million sale to play ahead of him? The story with Jota, just in case you haven't been across this, is that he plays for Rennes now. He had that spell in Al Ittihad in Saudi Arabia. It didn't go so well. He went into Rennes and I think was doing all right originally under their manager Julian Stefan, who was there for years. He was a manager when we played them a few years ago, probably 5 years ago now in the Europa League. And Stefan then left and Jorge Sampaoli came in. And I think Jota struggled for game time. I don't think he started a game yet under the new manager. And there was a report in L'Equipe a few days ago saying Rennes may well cash in on fringe players to help fund new first team signings for the team. And obviously there's been no actual links to Celtic, but obviously kind of people look at that and go, Jota might be available. And I think Rennes only paid maybe $6 million for him from Al Ittihad, which is similar to what we paid for him from Benfica. Maybe slightly less than we paid. But there's maybe a sense that Jota could be available. And as much as they always say don't go back, I think if Jota is available for a good fee and we are literally in the market for a left winger, then I just think Jota would make a lot of sense because he was just a hell of a player. He knows the club, knows the league, knows a hell of a lot of his teammates, and is just going into his peak year. So if Jota was available, I don't think that would be much of a debate for many Celtic fans, if I'm honest, because he was loved so much. But obviously there's no actual concrete links there, and I mean Brendan Rodgers didn't ever actually really work with Jota either. So they say don't go back, but for me, if Jota was available, that would certainly be a signing I'd want Celtic to make, and just offer us a bit more creativity on that left-hand side. It's a point we'll come on to in a wee second. Basically, the good news here is that it's going to be a pretty busy month between the Tierney stuff, the left-back stuff, the left-wing stuff that's a priority, and whatever we do with the forward situation. Some players are going to be coming and going. We're going to have matches all of January as well. So it's going to be a really exciting time for us all and the channel. Right, just want to move on to a few comments here. And some of this may go back into the transfer stuff. We've got Aidan saying it's worrying that when Kuhn is off it or injured, we have absolutely no creativity on the pitch. Hatate hasn't been given anything positive at all past few games in a goal threat sense. And other than those two, who is going to make chances for the team? Bit worrying, IMO. We have a severe lack of creativity when playing against a passive mid-low block setup. Yeah, I do think there's merit in that point. Celtic aren't looking as threatening over the past, 3 or 4 matches generally. Certainly if you look at Zagreb, last 3 matches, Zagreb, the cup final, we did score 3 goals, but I think didn't really look as kind of free-flowing, it's fair to say, as we did earlier in the season, and obviously Sunday as well. And I think that there's a number of reasons for that, and Aidan's obviously picking out the fact that we're quite reliant on Nicholas Kuhn, and I guess most teams would be. Kuhn's having a breakthrough season, and he's been unbelievable, and I don't think there's a massive issue with being kind of reliant on a star player. That's why they're star players, because they come up with the big moments and you give the ball to them, etc. And obviously when someone like Nicholas Kuhn is missing, there's a bit of an issue. And to be fair, even when Kuhn wasn't missing in recent matches, Zagreb especially, maybe he wasn't as involved in things, and our build-up play struggled a little bit. So yeah, I mean, Hatate, clearly creative. Left wing, Maeda is probably not you wouldn't look at Dyson Maeda and think he's a creative player. He's maybe going to get to the byline and get a ball across, but when it's not happening for Dyson Maeda, especially against a defence that's camped in like Dundee United were on Sunday, then you're not often going to get that bit of magic from Maeda to really kind of open up the game and put someone in, for example. And yeah, it's looked a little bit pedestrian, a little bit side to side in recent matches, and I'm not totally sure what it is. I think the fact that the forwards haven't been involved as much, Kyogo's really not getting involved and getting as many chances as he normally does. I think that's been a bit of a factor as well. And when you add that into Kuhn missing, and I mean, Alistair Johnson for me is a real creative spark in terms of the runs he makes and getting to the byline, and he's kind of been missing the last few games as well. Obviously played in the cup final and against Zagreb, but it's fair to say he was carrying an injury for the majority of those 2 games, and obviously missed Tannadice. So I just think a number of players missing, the team's going to look a little bit disjointed, and there's no doubt just generally the team don't have that same zip to their play, but I just firmly believe that just happens. Teams go through a dip throughout a season, and the promising thing for me, or the positive thing, is that we're still getting results in the main. And I know there's a comment yesterday about 3 draws in a row we've had, and there's a bit of a disagreement, because I do look at your comments and I really enjoy some of them, majority of them. A bit of a disagreement about, it is 3 draws in a row, but also one of them was a cup final we won, one was an away draw in Europe, and Sunday happens. So I think there's a big kind of thing about how you kind of view certain stats and how you want to interpret them. I just think Celtic are just struggling a little bit to get going at the moment, but I think it's probably just natural. The team were never going to keep up that that level we were showing at the start of the season all season. No one thought that was going to be the case. Everyone at that point was saying, but we'll get to December and it'll probably, not be flowing quite as well. And shock, here we are, late December, and that's happened. So I just don't think we should be massively surprised. The main thing for me is that Celtic keep getting results. And in the main, apart from Sunday, we have been. And even Sunday, it was a draw. We didn't lose the game, so it wasn't a complete disaster. It's just a couple of drop points. Right, anger management, green and white. This must be Stevie's account, anger management. Hee. Too many players are way off at the moment. We could really do with a winter break. Yeah, I've kind of just covered most of this stuff. I guess in previous years you could get to the winter break and recharge. It's different this year because you've got games every few days throughout January and onwards. So it's not really a case of getting that respite at any point. We kind of have to force ourselves out of this, and it just comes with playing matches. And we might look back on Sundays being a good thing, and it might just be the drop points the teams need just to refocus minds a little bit. Because I guess if you're maybe getting away with games a little bit, and some would maybe say we have got away with things a little bit in recent weeks, with like Pittodrie in the cup final to an extent, obviously being behind in that game. Maybe the team kind of just felt, right, we can keep going here. But when you actually drop points in a game you're really expected to win, like Tannadice, then maybe it refocuses minds. I think Celtic will be absolutely fine. And the next couple of games, home games at Celtic Park, it'd be great to get a couple of wins there and just feel really good about ourselves going to Ibrox. I mean, we're still in a great place. Aero saying 44 out of 48 points. Lost 1 out of 6 Champions League games. Trophy in the bag. Perspective is needed, I think. Hectic winter schedule and a game with injuries and sickness was always going to be tough. Let's beat the well and pick up the momentum again. Yeah, I just think generally that there's just such a need these days to kind of read so much into absolutely everything that happens, and it kind of baffles me with like individual players when like after one game these players would be like an unbelievable signing, and how people were talking about Arne Engels, for example, after his first 3 or 4 games. Like people were saying, we're already like going to be losing this guy in a year's time, just enjoy him while you can. And then he has like 3 or 4 poorer games, not even like horrendous games, but just not at the same level, a little bit off it, and suddenly everyone's going, waste of money and really not sure about this guy. Like I just feel like everyone's just so keen to make observations based on everything, and like I include myself in that. I think virtually everyone's guilty of it, and obviously with the team, as I say, I just think people are just getting a little bit concerned when I genuinely don't feel there's a massive need to be concerned. Like you look at what we're striving for this season, and we've won the League Cup, tick that off. Scottish Cup's not started yet, so we don't need to worry about that. Champions League, we're looking good. I mean, it's going to come down to the young boys game. Hopefully win that, and we're definitely qualified. A draw may be enough. Feeling good about the Champions League. We'd all have signed up for having, 8 points we've got after 6 games. Pretty good. And is it 9 points? I think it's 9 points, isn't it? 9 points after 6 games. And the league, like, we're looking really good for the league. 9 points clear of our rivals. Again, it's a situation you'd really have signed up for. And even if things were a lot tighter, even if we were a few points behind Rangers at this stage of the season, I think generally people would still feel all right when you look back at how grim things were at one stage last season and how strongly the team came on. I just think we're in a brilliant position, and things were never going to go completely fine all season. You were always going to have wee bumps, but in the grand scheme of things, like, we've dropped 2 points at Tannadice. It's a tough away game when we had a gruelling cup final the previous week. Injuries, illness, poor conditions, really defensive opposition. Like, it happens, and I just think everything's all right, to be honest. I think Celtic will pick this up and we'll be laughing and enjoying the second half of the season, and hopefully that begins on Thursday at Celtic Park against Motherwell. I'm going to head for now, everyone, get a little bit of sun. It's kind of sunny here in Melbourne, and we'll have a video for you tomorrow, by the way. Me and Stevie recorded one where we're going to preview the Motherwell game. Wee bit of Christmas chat in there, not a particularly long video, but that'll be out for you Christmas Day, first thing. So if you're a bit bored of your family, first thing in the morning, stick that on.